beef between you and Pac? Like, how did that whole situation come about?
Snoop and them did a video, you know, kicking over the New York buildings.
I'm already to work it. Take 10 steps and turn and shoot the first.
They had this little thing with Puff and Biggie's. I don't know if that's what sparked it or whatever, but he did that video and he started kicking over our buildings. And I spoke about it, CNN spoke about it, a couple of people had something to say, you know what I'm saying? A couple, but we were like the first ones. Pac got signed to Death Row. So I guess he felt like he was the one that had to step up and be like, you know what? I'm gonna be the one that's gonna go at all you, and I'm gonna show my loyalty to Death Row since I'm new over here, and we're gonna make it happen, right?
There's always been street talk that Prodigy is not someone you want to mess with.
I was actually carrying a gun to protect myself, you know, because I deal with a lot of jealousy in my career.
But nothing prepared Tupac for the shock of discovering that the man behind the name was as dangerous as the streets he hailed from. The thing is, Tupac used to be a diehard fan of Mobb Deep, soaking in their raw, unfiltered energy like it was gospel.
When he first came out, Pac loved Mobb Deep. He was a fan of Mobb Deep, like he loved him.
But as the East Coast-West Coast war raged on, that admiration twisted into bitter rivalry. And when you think about it, you'd expect Tupac, with all his swagger and unstoppable ambition, to steamroll any opposition. But he realized too late that he had totally underestimated Prodigy's prowess. Let's just say that they hit back hard.
Knocked out the box and got on the island, you officially got.
There's a story behind every legend, and this one is no exception. For years, Prodigy had built a reputation steeped in the harsh realities of Queens. Even after getting caught carrying illegal firearms,
I got caught with an illegal firearm in my car. You know,
he was still loved up in jail.
As soon as I walked in there, I seen a bunch of my from jail. You know what I mean? That was locked up. Niggas brought me mad food, snacks.
So when the stakes got higher, when every diss and every verse was loaded with the weight of legacy, Tupac's bold moves fell short against the sheer, unyielding danger that Prodigy brought to the table. In a split second, Tupac's invincible image cracked as fans saw the undeniable truth. Respect in this game wasn't just about power, it was about survival. And Prodigy embodied that survival like no other. But how did it all begin? In the later years of his journey, Tupac Shakur's life took a turn that could only be described as the harsh hand of fate, meeting a relentless storm. But bloodshed wasn't the only chapter in Tupac's final act. Alongside the bullet scars, he faced legal battles, landing him behind bars for 8 long months on SA charges.
He's definitely guilty. Anybody with Thug Life tattooed on their stomach is guilty. What type of reasoning is that?
And yet, even as he sat in that cold cell, awaiting his fate, the wheels of the system turned in his favor, releasing him pending an appeal in 1995. However, back when Tupac was locked away, he did an interview with Vibe magazine, sharing a glimpse into the man behind the myth, a man who, for a brief moment, tried to chart a new course, to cast off the weight of thug life and the burdens of a persona he'd outgrown. He talked about reading books, finding clarity, and even vowing to be sober. Thug life isn't something I'm gonna keep carrying, he said, almost as if he was passing the torch. But then, just 2 days after those words were out in the open, Mobb Deep dropped their single, a track that boldly claimed, "Thug life we still live in." It wasn't just a song, it was a provocation, a jab at Tupac from a distance, a challenge that hit him even from behind the iron bars of Riker's Island, or so he thought. For Tupac, thug life was more than just a catchphrase, it was a tattoo inked across his stomach, a lifestyle he personified. When he heard Mobb Deep's anthem echoing his own legacy, it cut deep.
Tupac is, you know, he's the one that was most known for saying that. So I think that pissed Tupac off a little bit. He took that as disrespect.
It wasn't just that they were carrying the mantle. It was that they were doing it on his terms, mocking the very transformation he'd just begun to embrace. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, trying to evolve, to step away from a life of constant conflict. And suddenly his voice was being co-opted by a new generation, one that might have been too eager to reclaim what Tupac felt was his alone. And then again, Prodigy's cameo on an LL Cool J and Keith Murray track called I Shot Ya only stoked the paranoia. Tupac, already on edge, immediately assumed the song was aimed at him. With things heating up, the East Coast versus West Coast rivalry became a live wire, ready to ignite. By that time, Tupac was reeling from the implications. The Mobb Deep's kids were cropping up on two different tracks now, clearly positioning themselves against him. In his eyes, these moves were declarations of war. And so, from the confines of his cell, he wasn't silent. He reached out, rallying his crew in Atlanta, laying down the unspoken threat that if anyone tried to redefine thug life without him, they'd soon find themselves on the wrong end of his wrath.
Mobb Deep is little kids. When I was in jail, when they came out with that song, where they was like, thug life, we still living it. You know, in that song that they had, they were talking about, yeah, they was like, thug life, we still live. I took it as a diss, so from jail, I'm calling my little homies in Atlanta.
Prodigy himself recalled, in interviews and in his book, moments when the tension was evident. There was that time in Atlanta, a night that still sends shivers down the spine of those who were there, when Tupac's crew bumped into Mobb Deep. According to Prodigy, the encounter was so charged that even the mere shout of thug life in the dark corridors of a club felt like a declaration of war. Fast forward to June 4th, 1996, a day when the air was thick with the promise of retribution. Tupac, along with the Outlaws, unleashed Hit 'Em Up, a track that sent shockwaves through the industry. Though the diss was wrapped in layers of subtle innuendo, it was clear as day. Tupac was calling out the young, brash upstarts who thought they could step into a world they barely understood. In one line, he named Mobb Deep directly, his words dripping with contempt as he ridiculed their youth and their inexperience. It wasn't just a rejection of their bravado. It was an assertion that they were nothing more than pretenders trying to muscle in on a legacy that wasn't theirs to claim. As the verse unfolded, Tupac went after Prodigy with a vengeance, ruthlessly dragging into the light a personal battle that went far beyond mere competition. He brought up Prodigy's lifelong struggle with sickle cell, a disease that, by its very nature, is an inescapable part of one's existence.
Mobb Deep, you want with us? You little young, don't one of you got sickle cell or something?
In that moment, Tupac was exposing vulnerabilities, turning personal hardships into weapons in a war that had long transcended the music itself. When Tupac's disses hit, every New York rapper felt it. It was a seismic shift that rocked their world. So now, the battle lines were drawn. It was a collision of ideals, the old guard versus the new, the personal versus the universal. Tupac, ever the complex figure, wasn't just defending his turf. He was fighting for the soul of thug life, a concept that was as much a part of him as the ink on his skin. And in doing so, he set in motion a chain of events that would ripple through the corridors of hip-hop history. Prodigy dropped a record a few years later that wasn't just music. He gave a raw, unfiltered glimpse into the pain he'd carried since birth. He rapped, "I was born with pain," a line that echoed through the corridors of his life, a legacy passed down by his mom. In his book, My Infamous Life, the autobiography of Mobb Deep's Prodigy, he also painted the picture of living with a burden that few could understand, a constant companion that made every day a struggle, every breath a reminder of fate's harsh hand.
I was born with a deadly disease called sickle cell anemia, and that makes it super rough being locked up with that.
But that doesn't make him any less dangerous, because when someone in Queens played Tupac's Hit 'Em Up on a little boombox and the track blared through the streets, Prodigy's ears caught every word. He recalls that moment like it was yesterday. Tupac dissing Mobb Deep, and for a minute he couldn't wrap his head around it. Why the hell is Tupac coming at us? He wondered, trying to piece together the reasons behind the attack. It didn't take long for the truth to settle in. Tupac had just signed with Death Row, and with Snoop as his label mate, the West Coast heavyweight had decided to jump headfirst into the drama, storming through our buildings, stomping through the city like it was his personal playground. And then Snoop Dogg and Thad Dogg Pound had also flipped out with their LA video, kicking over buildings and stomping through the streets of New York. For Prodigy, the reality hit home that the spectacle, the outrageous display of disrespect, was more than just performance art. It was a challenge, a provocation meant to ignite a war of words and wills.
Stomping through the city was like real disrespectful that they, was they knew that was disrespectful, you know what I'm saying? We went back at you know what I mean? We made our version LA, and we like, these, we holding it back.
And in that charged atmosphere, Prodigy didn't hold back. He confessed with a venom that's as real as the scars on these city streets that he wanted to kill Tupac.
Oh yeah, I want to yeah, hell yeah, I want to that jump him, cut him, shoot him, all that shit.
Tupac, in his quest to rewrite the rules and claim the legacy of thug life for himself, had crossed a line that Mobb Deep wasn't willing to ignore. So Prodigy and Havoc weren't silent for long. Just a few months later, they hit back with Drop a Gem on Them, a track that cut deep and shined a bright light on Tupac's missteps. Havoc's verse on that record was something else. He laid it on thick, pointing out that Tupac's disses only served to fuel the Mobb Deep brand. In interviews, Havoc admitted he was hyped when he first heard the track. The biggest rapper in the world had thrown his weight around, and suddenly their crew was in the spotlight. It was like Tupac was shouting them out, even as he dissed them, a twisted kind of honor that left them both enraged and, strangely enough, empowered.
You know what I mean? Because I never met him before in my life. I seen him from a distance, never met him, and didn't have no idea why he was shouting us out.
But the record wasn't just about that. Prodigy, in his verse, went on to spit some of the darkest lines that revisited the painful rumors that had swirled around Riker's island, whispers of what happened behind those cold, unforgiving walls. There were murmurs, fueled by voices like Wendy Williams, claiming that Tupac had been violated while incarcerated, a rumor Tupac always denied, but one that still managed to sting. Prodigy didn't hold back. He reminded everyone of the Quad Studios incident when Tupac got shot in the head twice, and questioned how he could keep defying the odds by going against the East Coast after surviving that ordeal. It was as if Prodigy was saying, "You should have learned something from all that chaos." He went further, taking shots at Tupac's state of mind, implying that maybe, just maybe, Tupac had been drunk when he recorded Hit 'Em Up.
You must have been drunk when you wrote that. Too bad you had to do it to your own self.
There was a bitter double entendre aimed at Tandra, alluding both to Tupac's self-sabotaging ways and to the infamous Quad Studios shooting, where legend has it he even shot himself in the process of protecting his own skin. Prodigy's words came like a prophecy. "Your days are numbered," he spat, laying down a grim reminder that in this ruthless game, time wasn't on Tupac's side. His lyrics twisted through the air, a mixture of street wisdom and raw aggression, as he recalled robberies in Manhattan and a robbery that cost Tupac 60 G's worth of jewelry. The message was clear: if you're gonna roll with guns, you better use them, because you might just get robbed again, your voice drowned out by the roar of retribution. Then there was the reference to Biggie's Who Shot You, a track that Tupac had taken as a personal affront, believing it was another jab aimed at the Quad Studios incident. In the battle of bars and syllables, no one on the West Coast could match Prodigy's flow. His lines were razor sharp, each word meticulously crafted to double back on Tupac's own legacy, to expose the contradictions in a man who once personified thug life. Prodigy's delivery was a masterclass in lyrical warfare, a blend of bitter truth and street-level poetry that left no doubt this wasn't just another diss track. It was a statement, a declaration that the game was evolving, and those who thought they were untouchable would soon find themselves on the wrong end of the ledger. And then the track hits a harder note. The verse winds down with even more pointed shots as Mobb Deep steps in, declaring themselves the true bearers of thug life. It's a claim that goes beyond mere bragging. It's a full-throttle assertion that they are the real deal, the guardians of a legacy that's been built in Queens on street corners and in dark recording studios. Mobb Deep, after all, wasn't just a crew. They were also brilliant producers, crafting those classic beats that still make heads nod today. Drop a Gem on Them was more than just radio fodder. It was an anthem that captured the raw energy of a time when every line carried the weight of life and death, when every verse was a gamble with fate. Every rhyme was loaded with the weight of a promise that if they ever came face to face, it would be a showdown that could only end in bloodshed.
We ever saw each other. You know, I might have got beat up, but either way, it was gonna go down.
Yet, Prodigy still talked about how, even though the rivalry was fierce and personal, there was a strange kind of respect buried beneath all the venom. Just like Havoc, he admitted that, after all,